increasing costs, and potentially leading to financial instability. Approximately half of the world's GDP is heavily reliant on functioning natural ecosystems, and the loss of biodiversity threatens these crucial resources. This loss can manifest as reduced crop yields due to pollinator decline, increased costs for businesses due to regulatory pressure, and reputational damage from unsustainable practices. So certainly these impacts are impediments to our goal of mutual prosperity and an economy of peace. We're very pleased to host our two speakers today who are sharing their expertise and educating the public on realistic solution that is available to every person. The title of today's program is Native Species Revival, How to Create a Homegrown National Park. That's a great goal. Let me just read the description real quick to set the tone. It says native plants are essential to the health of local ecosystems, and when planted on residential and communal land, they can restore habitat, support pollinators, and enhance larger corridors of revived ecosystems. Our speakers today are hosting a free community event on September 9th in Baltimore, Maryland, to educate our homeowners on this subject and the movement sparked by Dr. Douglas Tallamy, author of Nature's Best Hope, and his vision for the Homegrown National Park, which is a nationwide initiative to rejuvenate our ecosystems from the ground up, 1 yard at a time. Homeowners will meet landscape professionals and be empowered to transform their properties into native species environments. Increasing biodiversity is the best hope for addressing the crisis of declining native species populations, including those of native insects, a 45% decrease, and bird species, a 30% decrease. Wow. Which of course threatens the breakdown of our environment and life on Earth. So I'd like to remind everyone that this program is being live streamed and will be recorded and available in our IAED archives, past programs at us.upf.org. I'm looking forward to a robust discussion, so please put in your questions in the chat as we go along. We'll try to address them. So with all that being said, I'd like to introduce our speakers, our first speaker, and then turn the program over to you. So our first speaker is Mr. Greg Jones. And Greg is an environmental educator, researcher, and community organizer. He grew up in rural Carroll County, Maryland, and from a young age developed a love for nature and the outdoors. He earned a BS degree in biology from the University of Maryland, College Park. He served as a research assistant at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, calibrating the amount of effluents from nuclear plants, and also worked at the University of Maryland's Horn Point Lab, studying pollutants in water runoff from agricultural fields. He taught biology and horticulture for 12 years in Baltimore and developed an educational school farm during that time. Wow. For the past 5 years, Greg has worked with the Hyo-Jung International Foundation for Environmental Peace in the areas of environmental research and outreach activities. Currently, he is the founder and director of Native Species Revival, working in partnership with IAED, I'm happy to say, and he has the hope of leading future environmental projects together with the Universal Peace Federation. So Greg, the floor is yours. Share with us your vision. Thanks.
Okay. Do I need to click on any buttons? I guess not. Here we go. Well, it's good to be with great to be with you, Alan and Roger and all other UPF leaders. I'm grateful to be working with you and part of, in some ways, UPF at this time. A little about myself. I grew up, as I had stated in my bio, in Westminster, Maryland, next to a woods.
1 second. Are you wanting to share your screen, Greg?
I could, yeah, I guess so. Why not?
Okay, well, if it's up to you. Sorry.
All right, I'll put it on. I don't know if I'm going to get it right. It's very disruptive. Maybe I hit the wrong button again. Slideshow.
Do you see share screen, Greg? You need to select the share screen button. If you hover over the bottom, maybe the tab comes up.
Yeah, I did that. And then I see this window, Chrome window, entire screen. Let me see. Okay, here's native species, share. It's kind of small. Oh, God. I don't need to share a screen. I'd like
Just go ahead if you like, Greg, that's fine.
All right. Yeah, okay. I grew up in Westminster, as I was saying, with a close relationship with the environment around me. We live next to a nice wooded area, and it was wonderful. Then we moved to Baltimore City, and that was a shocking experience to move from Maryland to Baltimore City. And then another year later, my parents, when I went to college, my parents decided that they were going to separate. So I felt like I was kind of cut off from my hometown and cut off from my parents in some way. So I just started traveling for 6 weeks, went around national parks and just hitchhiked across country. But I was out in nature for 6 weeks and I felt very at home. And I felt like I could deal with a lot of things in my life that I had been going through. And got back to college and was ready to go again. So anyway, I grew a close respect for the natural world and a love for nature. I felt the spirit of calmness and peace in nature. And, the divinity was behind nature, I felt. So I studied biology, got a degree, then went on. 6 years ago, I started working with Mother Moon's environmental organization, the Homegrown International Federation for Environmental Peace. And I really enjoyed working with the team there in Washington. A lot of love and passion to care for the earth. During that time, before I moved back to my hometown, I did an environmental summit there in Crofton. And, about 3 months prior to booking the speaker, my sister gave me a book called Nature's Best Hope. I think Allison's heard of that book. And I was just shocked by Dr. Tallamy's simple the crisis of biodiversity, the loss of biodiversity in our ecosystems. I was just shocked by the simple solution he created. He created a nationwide plan for how we could get back to a healthy environment, and one that he actually has hope in. And when he gave his presentation, I think he inspired the audience, to all of us, that there is hope. There is hope because why? Because we can do something ourselves about it. So Dr. Tallamy had found a key point. Dr. Moon and Mrs. Moon, look at the environment, and they understand that the problem is it's not the environment. Science is not going to solve the environmental crisis. As one scientist said, I look at the environmental situation and I think, in 10 years, science can find the solutions. But I realized, no, that's not possible. It's up to human beings are the problem. It's not the environment. So he said, and that's a job that's up to spiritual people or religious people. And we scientists cannot address that. But, Dr. Tallamy has hit on a key point with the problem. As Dr. Moon and Mrs. Dr. Han Moon, Mother Moon, they say ignorance and human being self-centeredness is the key problem. And what is the solution? It is human beings fulfilling their responsibility. So this is what Dr. Tallamy is using in his strategy. He believes that human responsibility, through human beings coming together and taking responsibility for just a little piece of the problem on their own properties or on their church property, we can have hope to solve this big problem, because we can create corridors of health, corridors of healthy native species plants, which bring back the insects, bring back the birds, etc. The key, another very deep, important point is expressed in Romans 8:23. If you're dealing with a faith community, they love to hear us talk about environmental healing because it brings up some deep points in the Bible. The Bible says that the creation is longing, it's suffering, waiting for the redemption of the sons and daughters of God. And Father Moon goes on to say, not only the sons and daughters of God, not only creation is suffering, but the Creator himself is also suffering. God, who created this earth, created all natural world, of course is suffering because he wanted to see a beautiful environment for his children on this earth. And we who have a faith-based perspective can relate to that, can resonate with that. And many people have had spiritual experiences in the creation. The issue of the biodiversity breakdown is very serious. It can lead to even whether human beings can continue on this earth. We're already entering the 6th mass extinction, where many species by the year 2030, even very shortly, 10, 20 years, we're going to lose a lot of species. And this is very detrimental to our ecosystems. And we have to do something quickly. So it's not a game to play around with, but we all have to try to do our part to plant native species. That's what we're saying in this event on September 9th, is that we all can do our part. We all can stop planting. When you look at your yard, are you going to go buy a Chinese bush to put there and a Norway maple here? I hope people are a little more understanding. To be able to heal this environmental crisis, we need understanding. We need to learn about nature. We need to learn how to heal nature. Not just love nature, but we need intellect. We need to learn. So Dr. Tallamy is a great educator. And our speaker at September 9th, Allison, and our speaker here on this call, she's incredibly knowledgeable. She's a disciple of Dr. Tallamy, I would say. And you can see his YouTube's presentations on YouTube, Dr. Tallamy. And it's really a simple solution to a huge problem that we're facing. And this is not just local. This can be presented to a worldwide audience and should be. Just 2 points. Father Moon, when he went home to his hometown in Korea, he actually had a chance to go back to North Korea with Kim Il-sung there. I'm sorry I can't share the screen, but I don't want to drag you through that. He said that he was sorry that he went back to his hometown. He was saddened that he went to his hometown. Even though Kim Il-sung had fixed up the house and paved a road to his house, gave him the red carpet layout as an older brother. He treated him like an older brother, Kim Il-sung and Father Moon. And the thing that Father Moon was upset about was that there was no trees left. There was no plants left. There was no birds anywhere to be seen. The environment was desecrated. All the trees have been destroyed in North Korea pretty much. I mean, there are some nice forests left, but where human beings live, you won't find a stick on the ground because they have to pick it up for heat. They have to pick it up for fuel to cook. And so that's he cried out, "We have to restore my hometown." I had to bring back the insects, the birds back here. So he declared and committed unificationists to come back and do that sometime soon. So this is the same as the Homegrown National Park in relationship to God. God wants to see the earth restored, wants to see the nation healed. And, some cities are leading the way. I have a list of those cities. Alan's going to ask questions later on. And I can share a little bit about some of those. But this can be done on a big scale. Just like Donald Trump asked, hey, let's clean up the city of Washington. He sent the National Guard for a whole month. One man, took responsibility. So in the same case, I don't care about the politics, but in any case, if we have leadership, if we start to give this cry out to the nation, educate yourself and take care of your yard, get those invasives out. We have Norway pines on one lady's house property, as Allison knows. We have a tree of heavens on the Roland Park Community Center covered with those terrible spotted lantern moths or whatever they are. And so we have to get the invasives out and plant the native species. I'm grateful that I could meet Allison at the June 15th event and that she has agreed to be our keynote speaker on September 9th. I hope you all can tune in with YouTube and join us for that. It's going to be a very educational program. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Roger, for putting this presentation on for us. Thank you all for listening.
Okay, well, Greg, we feel your passion, actually, and appreciate your deep, caring and urgent call here. So thank you very much for putting it in a spiritual perspective for us as well. You mentioned about we have to have understanding and, what are we planting in our yards? And I think I fall into that myself, kind of lazy thinking, well, what looks pretty, this or that, but we're not thinking about the whole, ecosystem we're creating in our yards and our lawns. So that's a really, really good wake-up call for us. I'm going to move right to Allison, and then we'll take some questions. So if you want to, let me introduce Miss Allison Milligan. She is a master watershed steward, master naturalist, and master gardener. That's a lot. And also a Chesapeake Bay landscape professional. She designs landscapes using native plants to enhance the growth and viability of native species to Maryland. She writes a monthly column for the Anne Arundel Watershed Stewards Academy, which I looked at some of those blog posts, Allison. They're very nice.
Thank you.
And she features mid-Atlantic native plants and the life they support. She has been a naturalist correspondent for the Annapolis Capital Gazette and has traveled globally photographing fauna and their relationship with the local flora. Allison is a U.S. Air Force veteran, thank you, and a retired electrical engineer. She spent over 20 years in industry, most recently as executive director at JHU Whiting School of Engineering. So Allison, turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Alan. I actually will share my screen, and I want to talk to you and take you on a little trip with me to illustrate some of the places that are impacted by some of the choices that we've made as humans as we try to solve problems here. So the place I want to take you to is the Royal Botanic Gardens in Cranbourne. This is in Victoria, Australia. If you've ever been to Sydney, New South Wales, it's just south, right near Melbourne. And let's see. This is the first thing you see when you visit this Royal Botanic Gardens. As you can see, it is emblematic of the red center of Australia. So it's meant to show you the parchness that exists in the drought in the areas of Australia which don't receive very much rain. Rain is a scarcity in Australia. Australia is actually considered one of the canaries in the coal mine when it comes to climate change, because of the impact that the temperatures are having down there. So I want to just mention this journey of water in the garden because I visit, I've been to over 100 countries. I visit gardens around the world, and I look for the messaging that they are exhibiting. This is a native plant garden. In this garden, you will see water, the preciousness, the essentialness, the scarcity of it repeated again and again, and how they encourage people how to xeriscape and plant the right plants that will survive and support life. They also manage the bushland there, and they need to manage the bushland because there's a lot of fires in Australia. We know this. And so as we also have prescribed burns, they have many prescribed burns in the bushland. Why am I talking to you about this? Well, in 2019, in the winter, I visited Australia. Now, that year was the most intensive fire season in Australia. It actually is now known as the Black Summer. The fires burned 53 million acres. The smoke was responsible for many deaths. The fire was responsible for many deaths, but the resulting smoke was responsible for over 400 deaths. Let me see, what did I just do? I just went to, sorry, now I messed up. How did I not go? You can see my screen, right?
Yes, we
Yeah, I
can.
can't see my screen.
Oh, no.
Oh, here it is. Okay, so maybe here it is. So the fires burned 53 million acres. So that smoke, that pollution traveled all the way over to the United States. So we obviously didn't suffer like the people in Australia. But those deaths, over 400 deaths, those were human deaths, but that's not even touching any of the deaths of the animals, the endemic species that we know exist, like the koala, like the kangaroo, like the wombat, etc. So we talk about peace and economics. This was $100 billion loss for that country, the costliest natural disaster in their history. Now, why am I mentioning this? Well, of course, the cost and the heat in the native plants, which we'll get to now. Now, why? Now I can't change my slide. What is happening? Okay.
You want to close out and share again, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to do that. Thank you. I think I should do that. Yeah, so what I want to mention here is I want to introduce you to buffalo grass. So buffalo grass, for those of you that are not familiar, it's a native plant. It's just native to Africa where it grows in the savannas, and it's very good. It's really, really good for forage for livestock. So for people around the world, a lot of people eat beef. I'm not one of those people, but many people eat beef, and they need to feed the beef. So they plant this plant. It's grows wonderful in Africa. It's not considered an invasive plant. It's a highly functional plant in the savannas, but it was introduced. So it's good for livestock because it's highly nutritious. It's also very drought tolerant, even more tolerant of drought than most native plants. And it can also withstand some really heavy grazing. So what's the problem? Well, the problem was it was introduced to Australia, and it was introduced to Australia with good intentions, right? So it was planted in the 50s for cattle and to control the dust and all the erosion. So you can imagine the landscape there is very different than what you'd see in savannas of Africa. So good intentions, but it became a monoculture. It's extremely competitive. It reduced the biodiversity, and it's had an incredibly negative impact on the environment and the culture, the Aboriginal culture in Australia. But why is buffalo grass particularly a problem is it increases and the intensity of the fires that occur due to this plant. So, and also the frequency of those fires. So it's destroying these ecological communities. So not only the flora, the native forbs, the native grasses, the native shrubs, but also the fauna, because many fauna rely on the native species. And one of those animals is the wombat. That's an endemic species that is actually in danger. Now the wombat can switch to another grass, and it has switched. They're actually investigating the result of that on the wombat's health, because it used to be 1% buffalo grass. Now it's 27% because of the invasiveness of this plant. So that's something else to think about. And the wombat is lucky because the wombat can switch to another food, not like a monarch butterfly caterpillar. A monarch butterfly caterpillar can only live on milkweed. It can't switch to any other plant. Why am I mentioning? Okay, so now I want to bring you closer to home. So many of you are familiar. In August 8th, a fire started in Hawaii that became a tinderbox that destroyed acres and acres and killed over 100 people. That fire was started by it was an electrical wire that actually started it. But the resulting fire spread so quickly also because of this buffalo grass, which Hawaii introduced also. which brings me to Arizona, closer to home. Buffalo grass, again, is arguably the most serious threat to conservation efforts in Tucson. And it's not just the native plants. We know that it's crowding out those native plants. We know it's really competing for the water because it grows where there's not a lot of water and it can live on very little water. So, but also the space, right? When we plant invasive plants, they take over the space where native plants would thrive. But the worst impact that we've seen with the buffalo grass in Arizona is also the resulting fires, because it's no longer a fireproof desert. And we're seeing that in America because we're seeing fires in California and Arizona and many parts of the West are resulting from this one plant that, had it not been introduced, millions of dollars, hundreds and hundreds of lives would not have been impacted like this. So this brings me to lawn. Now, another grass. And this brings me to the Homegrown National Park, because lawn grass is a monoculture. And it's the largest crop in the United States, but no one eats it. What's going on? So this is if there's a a 3-alarm fire. This is our 3-alarm fire. We've really grown a love for lawn, and in the case of these large, expansive lawns, we know that they're not effective at doing things we need for our public and private spaces to do. So lawn is really lousy at sequestering carbon. We know trees are perfect at sequestering carbon. That's what they do, right? So we need trees that can really intensely sequester carbon. We know the lawn is not good at supporting the food web. In fact, it doesn't support insects or birds. I mean, other than worms that robins can eat, it's lousy at supporting the food web. And managing runoff, it's not good for erosion. It doesn't have a deep root. It requires more water. And it's really bad at supporting pollinators. And we know pollinators are important, and we need them if we want to have fruits and vegetables like avocados and onions and berries and things. So when we're talking about peace and we're talking about economics, we know that peace can only be obtained if we all have access to clean air, right? If we have these resilient ecosystems that are sustainable. When you have diversity of plants in your environment, then you have a more resilient ecosystem. When you have cleaner water, you're less likely to go to war. You're likely to share and live a more prosperous life. You can talk to people in India. When I traveled to India, I stayed with a cohort of students in India at a university, and I stayed there for a week with them because we were there on an educational trip. And it was a 2-bedroom, like when your kids go off to college. I was sharing a room with another person, and the shower that we shared was a group shower, and we were each given one 2-gallon bucket, and that was how we were to bathe each morning, and that was the only water that we were allowed. And this isn't unusual. This was actually a very well-known university. And so in the morning, I was able to pour water, wash, and then get the soap off. But that's how those kids use water in some of these universities. So I'm just mentioning this because I know my kids went to school at the University of Maryland, and that was not their experience. And then supporting pollinators, lawns are really lousy at that. And we know, I mean, Alan mentioned already, if you have pollinators, you have higher crop yields. No, they don't pollinate grasses. They pollinate the fruits and the vegetables that we all need to live healthy lives. So lawns, and reducing our lawns, is one of the most impactful things that we can do. And that's one of the messages that we talk about when we talk about the Homegrown National Park, is using the space that's been given to us, whether it's a patio. We can plant native plants on a patio, or whether it's a large, expansive lawn like this, because a lawn like this is also one that we have to maintain, and many people will put fertilizer on it, which then runs off, which causes algae blooms and really impacts the water and the life that the aquatic water. Most of the animals that I deal with are terrestrial, and but managing runoff is really important for the aquatic life. So I just wanted to mention that those are some of the things when we're talking about biodiversity. You can see how having monocultures like or introducing invasive plants, good intentions gone awry. So we really need to be more aware of our choices and how we make some of these decisions. So that's the beginning of what, now I have a few more slides, but I don't know if you want to have some questions on what I've already said.
We have a few more slides, Allison. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I will tell you, this is Dr. Doug Tallamy's website. This is a place where you can go to get more information. I encourage you to do that. This is just one of the examples of Kyle Larberger. He's in Alabama. He plants natives to support critical wildlife habitats. Many people go on and give Doug this information, but Dr. Doug Tallamy has videos of his own giving you some history of how he began his journey and why this is so important. So he's an entomologist at the University of Delaware. So he's a really busy guy, but he does give talks still. So he does mostly Zoom now because it's more impactful that way. He can reach more people. But he also has a place where you can find keystone plants. I went there this morning and the link wasn't working properly, and I emailed the executive director there, and he says, Allison, I'll try to have it fixed by 2, but it has not been fixed. So be patient, but you can find keystone plants are plants that have do heavy lifting in the environment. They support more life than the average native plant. So Doug Tallamy has recognized there's some plants that are more vital to add to your property or the area that you have than others. And so those are the plants that we really want to promote, but we want to promote just the existence of adding these at all layers, not just trees and shrubs, but ground covers and forbs and things. So this is his website. I encourage you to visit that. You can learn a lot more there. There's where you find the keystone plants. But if you want a list of other keystone species, you can go to this site. And this is the National Wildlife Federation. And you'd have to copy that link because the trail to get here it's kind of circuitous. So if you go, maybe you can capture that, or I can send it to you later.
If you can capture that and put it in the chat.
Yeah, that's what I'll do. I can do
Okay.
that. So I just want to tell you, after I read Dr. Doug Tallamy's book, I am a disciple of his. I've been to many lectures. Every book is signed. I know him very well. This was my garden. I came out of, after reading his Bringing Nature Home book, his first book, and I pulled out my Russian sage, my pennisedums, my invasive grasses, and I planted native species. And as a result, this is my garden today. My garden today is thriving with lots of butterflies. I have host plants. Those are plants that support the caterpillars of the butterflies that I want to see in my garden. So if you want to see butterflies, you just can't plant plants that have nectar. That's not going to cut it. You need the animals so they can have the entire cycle of life. And that's where native plants come in, because most plants, like certainly not buffalo grass, but most plants that you purchase at your average nursery are not host plants. They are plants from other parts of the world. And so they don't support the caterpillars that live in your backyard. Those caterpillars that want those plants live wherever you bought that plant from, mostly Asia and Europe and in the United States. I'll just quickly go through the main threats that are facing pollinators. And those are habitat loss, habitat fragmentation, and habitat degradation, pesticide use, and climate change. I'm going to just go through here and show you some examples of that. So when we talk about habitat loss, you can see this is where we actually do development. And I know the IAED is really involved. We talk about economic development. We want people to have places to live. But when we take away the forests and all of the vegetative material, then we basically replace it with unusable habitat. So this isn't even a place where you could live, right? They also increase the temperature. We now have polluted runoff and flooding, and I understand we need places to live, but these environments do not support life, right? So with habitat loss, it doesn't mean just having a hard life or a harder life. It means there is nowhere to have a life. That's different than habitat fragmentation. So you see this habitat fragmentation a lot because you want to build a road and there's a big forest or a big, area, a prairie, for instance, and you want to build a road, or a baseball park or some agricultural land. So this fragmentation is when large areas of a habitat are broken into smaller fragments that are separated. And when that happens, populations of animals are forced to compete. So now, for the example, an example would be a fox. Like I have a lot of fox in Maryland, but if we put a road through there, now the fox has to cross a road. There's danger in that. And also, the movement is so restricted that finding a mate is difficult. So even, reproducing is difficult now because the animals aren't near each other. And so there's not as much food either because we've now replaced a lot of the land with whatever it is we built. So this also impacts pollinators because most pollinators don't travel long distances. We know butterflies migrate. We know that that honeybees can travel for, upwards of a mile or more, but our native bees, that's not generally the case. So our native bees don't travel, especially mining bees. A lot of our native bees, they're ground bees. And so this fragmentation impacts them also. Now, when we talk about habitat degradation, we've seen this. This was the buffalo grass example. This is when we introduce invasive and alien species. And we think we're doing a good thing. Kudzu was introduced for that reason. This plant in the middle, the burning bush. Oh, we love red. Well, that's great, but this is now a major disaster all along the mid-Atlantic coast because we like red. And we need to do better. We need to think not just of what pretty is. So Alan mentioned this also. Pretty is a reason to buy a plant, but not the best reason to buy a plant. So when we see these things, and then of course we have these monocultures of grasses, and we know monocultures are bad. And that's, we can go all the way back to the potato in Ireland, monoculture. We didn't have another option, and they got the disease, and many, many people died because of that.
Allison, I think I'll stop you there and we'll take a few questions. Is that okay?
Sure, that's great.
That was very, very helpful. The fragmentation is something that we kind of see around us, but I don't understand it in the way that you put it there about forcing pollinators to cross barriers and things like that. So very good. I do want to mention that someone chatted here that we have a property up in New York that is listed on the Homegrown National Park.
Okay, very good.
And he has an email, Dominic Barber has an email in there. He says he'd love to connect with like-minded people, especially in our faith community. So that was Dominic, thank you for sharing that for us. There is a question that I think is a natural one because we talk about, you're speaking about native species, but is that exclusive then of importing other kinds of species from around the world to diversify it's a different kind of diversity, I understand, but.
Right. So we have ecoregions within environments, within countries, and we have contracts with countries about our ecoregions and about how we share those ecoregions because animals don't have a sense for territories, right? So they're going to go to Canada, they're going to cross into Canada, they're going to cross into Mexico, they're going to go where there's food. So when it comes to when we talk about invasive plants, we're talking about since colonial times. So when the colonists came over, they came over from England and they loved planting English plants. And so plants, because they wanted plants to remind them of their homeland. So they planted things like English ivy. Well, we know what happened then. And anyone that lives in New England, I know English ivy has just anywhere that it's planted, it covers the ground. And then when it goes up a tree, it gets berries. When it goes vertical, it does the most danger. Actually, when it's on the ground, it's dangerous enough because it doesn't really do really good erosion control. But when it goes vertical, then it gets the berries. And the problem with that is if you're a robin, you are hungry and you will eat those berries. And then you will come into my yard and poop it out, and you'll provide lots of fertilizer in the process. And now I will have English ivy in my yard, even if I was able to get rid of it last month. I just visited a lady that just happened actually. So those plants, we think we're doing a good thing. They're pretty, they're not harmful. And many people, they'll plant a plant like a burning bush thinking, or a barberry. Barberry harbors ticks, right? Those are dastardly plants. But you think that because you only see the single plant in your yard, that it's not spreading. And that's so far from the truth, because what you don't see is the animal that ate the seed or the berry has now transported it into the natural area where that animal actually lives. And the robin or the bluebird, they don't know that in eating that berry, they are actually harming their opportunities to provide life for the next generation of their own species.
Wow. Okay. No, I have barberries in my yard. I have to, 'cause
I
I
think
didn't
you
put it
should.
there. It was the people who built the house put it there, right? So I guess the problem with there's a chat here. And someone asked, "What is the downside of the red bushes and plants?" So the burning bushes are
So
they
burning
do they,
bushes are incredibly invasive, and I'm, you know what, I really hope that you join me on the 9th, because I'll go into more detail on this, explaining
okay.
that. But the burning bush is one of those plants that we planted because we like to see the color in the fall. And what I try to explain to people is I understand that, and there's other options. We have wonderful plants in every state, pretty much, that turn red. You have to wait for them. Right? So we have viburnums, Viburnum acerifolia, maple leaf viburnum. We have chokeberries that turn red. We have sumac that turns red. It may not turn the brilliant red that you see from this burning bush, but it's a natural plant that grows here that supports other species of life, which is critical if we're going to create biodiversity. And by the way, the burning bush, it's a horrible name for it because people associate that with the Bible. And when I go to churches to do designs, they have biblical gardens and they have this invasive plant, thinking it was the burning bush. That is not the case. It does not come from Jerusalem. It was not the plant. So it's just that it looks like it's burning, so people use it, and it's just it's an unfortunate connection they've made. So, and there's many. I mean, we could, Japanese honeysuckle, wisterias, Oriental bittersweet, and actually the Norway maple. The people that came from Norway, they loved their maple. They planted it. Another really, really bad plant that we have in our environment. And
I
it takes
see.
up a massive amount of space, right? And it's very difficult if you go to someone's home, like I did 2 days ago. I was at a school teacher's home, and I'm helping her create an entirely new environment in her property. But the hardest thing for her will be to remove this Norway maple that's in her property. And the reason why is it will cost $1,000 someone to cut that down, probably more. And so she's very purse strapped. And so I'm just going to keep planting native plants there, and maybe that plant will have its.
I have a question here from Wayne. And we're getting into, what can be done really on the state level, federal level, and local level too, because I know in my town they had for a while they encouraged no mow, right? So let your yard grow, but then people objected a little bit because then you had lawns that were 2 foot of grass or 1 foot of grass.
Yeah,
So
there's a thing, it's called no mow May. And I
no,
also I understand the idea behind the no mow May. I don't actually prescribe to it. I do mow my lawn, but what I would encourage people to do is to use body powered or electric mowers and to mow high. So when you do, and a couple things happen when you mow high. You're creating a deeper root. Your plants are having to go. You're creating more shade. You're actually reducing weeds, because weed seeds won't have as much opportunity to see the sun. And so, 3 to 4 inches of your native fescues, for instance, is really important. And then also watering in the morning, not in the evening. You don't want the water to sit on there, and not in the middle of the day when it evaporates. That's just silliness. You water early in the morning, and you don't need to do it every day. Um,
you're
oh,
full
so
of
what?
tips. You're full of great suggestions for us, Allison.
So, so I can tell you that if you are able to get on a board Well, first of all, I think what everyone should do is educate themselves. And you can educate yourselves in a number of ways. People learn in different ways. So you can go on the website, you can see Dr. Doug Tallamy's talks. You can go to your native your state-sponsored schools, so the University of Maryland, the University of Alabama, the University of Maine, all of these universities have a program called Master Naturalist. Now, I've been growing plants since I was a very, very young person. But if you are interested, so Master Gardener program is a good program, but I would encourage you, the Master Naturalist program is what really puts it together. Animal and plant, the connection.
So if you're someone who's not a gardener,
Mhm.
and you would like to have something done to your lawn, there are organizations out there, or would you suggest going to the universities? Maybe Greg, you can answer that too. How does someone who's willing to plant a native garden get that done? Greg?
Get it. I forgot, I lost the first part. You're asking how does
If someone is not a gardener but would like to do something with their property, where do they go? How can they get that done?
well, talk to a native plant landscape person that can help you design your property, choose the plants properly. You can go to a native species, native species plant place. They can help by providing the plants. But I would say talk to somebody like Allison's a native species landscaper. She would start. Yeah, I would start you off right from the beginning. You can also watch YouTubes with Douglas Tallamy and others. Yeah, tons of stuff.
So the universities sponsor the program, the Master Gardener program. And the Master Gardener program, the reason why I wasn't encouraging it specifically is I found that not all Master Gardener programs are the same. So in some cases, they have a course, which mine did, in native species, in native plants. And I think that across the board now, that is now more of a requirement. Because just because you're a master gardener doesn't mean you are an advocate of native plants. Some people learn, they are educated about it, but they still have a really hard time not planting forsythia or not planting Rose of Sharon, and they just can't stop themselves. So, but when you become a natural, so that's why, but the Master Gardener program is a very good program. You learn about lawn care, you learn about plants, shrubs and trees, and hopefully you will also learn about native species. When you become a naturalist, and it's like an 8-week course, 1 day a week, you get to meet like-minded people, you get to learn how you can do things. But you don't have to do the program. If you're not a gardener, you don't have time. You can call these organizations and say, do you have a program? Like in Maryland, we have this program called Baywise because we live on the Chesapeake Bay. So we have groups of people, and I'm one of those people. I go to homes and there's a questionnaire we have ahead of time. We ask people, are you trying to solve a problem? Do you have foundational issues, runoff, erosion, blah, blah, blah. And then we go there and we can offer advice on what should be planted, where should be planted, where to buy the plants, right? But those Master Gardener program could give you that information. And those should be available. And most of those universities have websites.
Are there some best practices from cities who are trying to incentivize homeowners to move in this direction, to change practices? Is it all left up to the people who are inspired, or are there some financial or other kinds of incentives?
There's definitely incentives. So I know we have a stormwater fee here in Maryland, and it's based on the size of your property. But if you were to install a rain garden using native plants, and they would give you a lot of guidance on this, then your stormwater fee goes away. There's other incentives. I know there's a buyback program, or it's not even buyback, it's a return program where I know in Maryland we have it, but also in Pennsylvania, where you take an invasive plant out of your property and they'll provide a native species as a replacement. So, but if you contact a native nursery, and I have to say, most of the native nurseries, they're not open. This is odd, but they may not be open to residents. They're more wholesale. So when I I'll be visiting people in Baltimore in this year and next year. I will design a landscape for them. I do this for free. I drive a truck, I go there, I pull a trailer full of plants. I design a landscape, and then if they are interested, I get those plants and I deliver them to them, and then I site them, and they pay me for the plants, and they pay me 20%. So if they spend $100, they give me $120. That pays for the gas in my truck and the tolls that I have to pay. But in that way, I'm able to put in, like, one year I put in 100,000 plants. 100,000 plants. And you know
Whoa.
why? It was during COVID and everybody was home. And the landscapers were allowed to keep working because they were outside. So I would visit, like, I actually visited, I think, 30 people in February. That was so ridiculous. It was freezing cold. So those things. So, but I would also tell you, and I'm going to give you information on this. There's ordinances like Somerville, Massachusetts. If there's anyone from Massachusetts, I know that town. They passed a first of the kind native plant ordinance that says any new planting in our community on a public property has to be 100% native. That's what makes it so bizarre is the percentage. Normally they'll say 50% or 70%, but in this case it was 100%. Pollinator Pathway is an organization. Anyone can look up Pollinator Pathway. It's a fantastic program. So you can see it's linked to municipalities that have restrictions on pesticide use. You can see in Austin, if you go to the Zilker Field, the Zilker Metropolitan Park there, that's a no pesticide location. I know that's in Austin. I know they also have it on the soccer fields in South Carolina. In Maryland, we passed a law, House Bill 322, which says homeowner associations cannot say no to native plants. Now, homeowner associations generally have very strict rules about how they want things to look. And so you can allow people to plant native plants and they have to maintain them so they look nice, but you can't exclude the option.
Very
And
good.
Nancy Lawson is the author of a book called The Humane Gardener. And you can go to her website, The Humane Gardener, and you can read, she does a blog, and it's a wonderful blog. So she talks a lot about how plants support life, and she gives some really good examples. And she's the one that caused that bill to happen because it was her sister's HOA that said, you can't plant native plants. And then her sister called Nancy and said, Nancy, I can't plant any native plants here. And Nancy said, oh, we'll have none of that. And she took it upon herself to challenge the HOA. And so that law was passed. So this is just an example how educating yourself, getting on a board, being involved, you know, can really make a difference.
Allison, you said in a phone call I had with you, you compared Douglas Tallamy to Rachel Carson in terms of his significance. Is that an overstatement, or
That is
why
not
do
an
you
overstatement.
why do you say that?
And so for those of you familiar, Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. And Silent Spring, she basically was going in her yard and not hearing songbirds. And then it wasn't until she made the connection, and she made it with Rosalie Barrow Edge, who is one of my heroines in nature. They discovered that the eggs of the eagles were becoming soft shell and actually not developing, and so the eggs would crack and the eagles were not being born. And that's when legislator really took up, started listening, because songbirds are one thing, but the iconic American eagle will have none of that, right? So then we said, okay, what's this? And they resolved that it was DDT. So through Rachel Carson's studies and Rosalie Barrow Edge's help, that happened. Now with Doug Tallamy, he is raising this big flag saying, we're losing our native species because we're not planting native plants. Now you'll hear about, if you were able to join us on the 9th, I would love to have you come because I'll give you some lots of photos of how this works, of how we can do it in your own yard. But he has had the impact. He's a very humble, quiet, busy guy, but it's just a message that will resonate. When Greg talked about, he read a book. That book made him pick up the phone and call Doug Tallamy and say, hey, can you come talk at my conference? That's what that book did. That book made me go in my backyard and pull plants that I had just planted a month before because I learned they were not healthy for the environment. So he really is someone who can motivate
He's a
you.
major change person. Wow. Hey, Greg, in the last few minutes, why don't you share with us about your September 9th event? I know you've done a lot of work to reach out to uh, communities and some churches and all that. So uh, tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, let me try to share the details.
Okay.
I don't know why, but it's never easy to do this. All right, here it is. Should be. Can you see anything?
I think it's loading, but
So now you need to do the slideshow. There you go. Now hit the slideshow.
Slideshow, folks.
or-
Slideshow. Oh, over here. Sorry. There we go. Okay. All right. The title of the event is Allison's title to her presentation, Why and How to Create the Homegrown National Park in Your Yard. So that's a national vision, as we've been sharing, created by Douglas Tallamy and his partner. And there's a website you can go to get a lot of information off of. September 9th is the date. That's that's a Tuesday from 7, wow, where's the timing on that? 7 to 8:30. 7 to 8:30 p.m. Please go ahead and register with that QR code, and you'll get more information from the Google document you go into. We also have a web page that's being developed, Native Species Revival, and we're putting a lot of links for valuable documents for you to find how to develop your garden in your region. Keystone species in California, keystone species in Chicago, and of course, Maryland, et cetera. But the National Wildlife Federation has done a lot of work to develop furthering the homegrown national park idea. So we hope that you can join. There's also a YouTube link. If you go to that QR code, the YouTube link, it's there. It's simply at Native Species Revival. That's the YouTube link. So it's also written on the Google Doc when you sign up. It's a short event, so I hope you all can join and get some ideas. Get one of Doug Tallamy's books. Start looking at the YouTubes. It's a great journey to understand more about how to heal our environment.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Yep.
Well, we could go on and on. There's a lot of, this touches every one of us in many ways. We didn't get to all the questions, but wow. You touched on the invasive species. Maybe I'll just end on this because if it's a big problem, and it is, what are the solutions to, other than planting, native species? Are there laws that should be passed to restrict invasive species? Is it realistic? Because, things cross over the boundaries of oceans and air currents forever.
Well, there is legislation, and you should always pay attention to when your government is reducing environmental restrictions, because that's a serious that should raise your red flags to you. And I believe that might be happening now. So you should really pay attention to when our parks are being run by now private places. These are public parks where we want to have places to seek peace, right? And share with our families, for especially people that don't have the opportunities. And so with invasive plants, they generally, the spotted lanternfly, Greg mentioned that earlier, the tree of heaven was brought here because someone liked the way it looked. the English ivy similarly, the Japanese honeysuckle, the Chinese wisteria. So when we make our plant choices, we need to make them, I know everybody likes a pretty face, but we got to go beyond the pretty face, right?
That's a good stuff. Yeah, and I got a lot out of this. I'm telling you, my zucchini plant didn't really bear much fruit this summer, but I think it's because of lack of bees in my area. So it's affecting me personally. I need to get on board with what you're saying there.
The Washington Times, where I had my office, I looked out the window, and the whole driveway there is surrounded by Bradford pears. Yep. They were brought over here by the University of Maryland landscape person surveying plants for landscapers, and they spread. They weren't supposed to spread. They're a cultivar, but they managed to propagate and pollinate each other, and now they're all up and down the East Coast. And there's laws against them in some states, but not here in Maryland yet.
Thank you, guys. We'll pay attention, and we appreciate you bringing this to everybody's attention. Good luck on your program on the 9th. And I guess what you're saying is anybody can join by YouTube as well.
Yes.
So, but those in the Baltimore area, take advantage. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you,
Thank
Greg.
you, guys.
Thanks, guys. God
All
bless.
right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Yeah, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Everybody can help.
Save America.
Save America. Save the world. Hey, Dominic. Saving Belvedere.
Hey, Greg. I'm on the bandwagon.
Here we
Good.
go.
I might be the only one, but
But if you're on the bandwagon, then you probably have a group of friends that you could also join that bandwagon.
oh yeah, I keep looking for them. I'm hunting for disciples. I've got one or two, but doing the best I can.
We'll do a program up there with you sometime, Dominic.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, we need to get the word out regularly.
Yeah. There's a lot of people in that Westchester area, I'm sure.
Oh, there is. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of great pollinator pathway people that I'm connecting with.
Yeah.
Good. Talk to Allison. She's a wealth of information.
Yeah. Thank you, Allison, for your great presentation. It was-
Thank you very much. I'm going to
Let's
go.
get something,
I know you
let's get
could have
something
said
going on the
100
West
times
Coast,
more,
Wayne.
right?
Yeah. Let's get something going on the West Coast.
Yes.
We'll do it. Bye.
Okay. See
Hey,
you
You
all.
know.